This week's Just You award goes to actually my co-host, Kevin Bulger. We do a podcast together called No Longer Ashamed. It's for adult survivors of childhood abuse. The reason I chose Kevin is he had never done anything like this before. He tried some voiceover work, a little announcing, and he loved it, and he decided he was going to do a podcast. One of the first things that happens sometimes when you start a podcast is you get some bad habits, saying things like everybody and you guys. But Kevin is so brilliant. He really keeps the focus on one person. So when people hear this podcast, they feel like we're talking just to them. And of course, Kevin has a wonderful deep voice, which people really love. And for him to use it in such a beautiful way to engage us and help us feel like we matter and that we are seen and heard. Kevin, congratulations on the Just You Award. Keep up the good work.
And the fact that the optimism came on the day he passed was unseemly. I thought, oh no, my first instinct was to push it away because I thought, no, there's something wrong with this. But you know what? I thought if I could be as strong as I was during our 2-year ordeal and then take such good care of him at the end when he needed to be taken care of, maybe if good things want to come my way, I should allow it.
If you have been thinking or saying, I want to do a podcast, but then immediately you think, I'm not techie. I hate my voice. Who would listen? What would I say? If you are a woman over 40, you have things to say. And with my course, the Podpreneur Blueprint, you can get a podcast up and running within a week if you'd like. If you're not techie, don't worry. I give you options of how to find someone that can help you. We are not islands. We don't do this alone. If not now, when? Because on New Year's, when you make that new resolution, this year, I'm going to think about this. You could be saying, this year I did, and I have 52 episodes. You can do this. Learn all about podcasting with the Podpreneur Blueprint System. Go to www.coachlori.com and get your flash sale today. Somebody's praying for an answer, and you have it. Will you say yes? Go to www.coachlori.com. That's LAURIE.
Has your life, your dreams been interrupted? Good news. It is possible to reinvent our lives. People are doing it every day, and some are brave enough to share the struggles, disappointments, and challenges. If you are looking for a new beginning, a do-over, or to rediscover your passion, maybe even find a new one, then grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Interrupted, Act 2, Reinventing Your Legacy, with your host, Coach Lori.
I'm so glad to welcome Vicki Paris Goodman. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. I'm thrilled to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you because when I heard about you, it really resonated with some things going on in my family. So tell us about you. Your webpage is inspiredgrief.com, but there is so much more to your story.
There is. Well, first of all, I lived most of my life in Los Angeles, California, but moved to Arizona for retirement 7 years ago with my now deceased husband, Sam. I'm a retired mechanical engineer. I sing and play violin semi-professionally. I was a theater critic on the side for over 20 years for a local newspaper in Long Beach, California.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, what a variety.
Hey, engineers have to balance it out with a creative side, otherwise, I don't even want to think of the alternative.
Oh, I love that. The podcast is called Interrupted. We talk about how our life pivoted, got interrupted. Tell us about your life now and what you're doing, and then we'll get to what
what happened and what caused you to write your book?
Yeah, well, I'm enjoying life in my new hometown here in Arizona. It's wonderful. And especially given that I lost my husband to cancer in 2019, not long after we moved here, I'm really grateful to have been in a place I love so much and have so much support, which is kind of counterintuitive. You'd think all my friends would be back in LA where I spent, so much of my life. But actually, there are a lot of retirees here. Nobody moves with friends. So everybody's looking to meet people. So it's a great place for someone like me to be, especially given what happened to Sam. We got his diagnosis just a few months after moving into our new home here. I will admit right up front that I did much of my grieving when we received the diagnosis. I was so scared, and it took a full week of driving to a patio out in back of a Starbucks in town where I knew no one ever sat. I'd tell Sam I'm going out for a while, and I'd go over there every afternoon for a week and cry my eyes out. Finally, after a week of that, I told myself that the ritual had served its purpose and I didn't need to go to the patio anymore. And I stopped crying as well. For the next 2 years, most of which Sam did really well. For a good year and a half, you couldn't tell he had cancer or was even being treated for it. But then the last few months, there was a slide down in which I took care of him. And I write about all of this in the book. And what happened, though, the main message is what happened immediately after Sam passed. Even on the day he passed, I was suddenly flooded with optimism. It was weird because I'm not a particularly pessimistic person, but I'm not especially optimistic either. I'm just kind of middle of the road. But suddenly I'm flooded with optimism and seeing opportunities coming my way soon after that. And the fact that the optimism came on the day he passed was unseemly. I thought, oh no, my first instinct was to push it away because I thought, no, there's something wrong with this. But you know what? I thought if I could be as strong as I was during our 2-year ordeal and then take such good care of him at the end when he needed to be taken care of, maybe if good things want to come my way, I should allow it. So I let myself be led, which is quite something coming from a control freak like me. But I did. I let myself be led, and it turned out to be a fantastic decision. What happened then was all of these opportunities were coming my way, as I said, but also insights, revelations, and clarity. And I knew they were mostly, if not all, coming from outside myself. I was being led by God. And I now look back on it and think I was chosen to be a messenger. And maybe part of the reason I was chosen to get this message out there, and I haven't even begun to tell you what the message is yet, but maybe part of the reason I was chosen was because I was raised in a secular family. No one that I know of believed in God or an afterlife. In fact, my parents and grandparents believed that people who believed in God and an afterlife were foolish and weak. So that's the message I grew up with. Now, all of these insights were coming to me. Someone very timely recommended a book about a near-death experience of a neurosurgeon that completely changed my life. It took me the rest of the way to believing in God and an afterlife. And then all these serendipitous events kept happening. At first, I chalked them up to happenstance, but I have a list of 7 of them here. It was just too many to be sheer coincidence. The serendipitous events, the opportunities coming my way that I felt motivated to embrace, the insights and revelations that I want to pass on to others so that they don't grieve so hard. All of this came to me within months, certainly within the first 2 years after Sam passed.
Wow, that's incredible. Tell us the name of your book.
It's called To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. I admit right up front that inspired grief is kind of an oxymoron, but it's what I believe I experienced. So I went with it. And in fact, I even acquired the domain, which is where you can get my audio episodes of the book. And I've got it divided into roughly 3 segments. The first third or so is Sam's life and a little of my own and our time together. I felt it was necessary for people to get to know us. So that the middle part where I talk about the diagnosis and treatment and Sam's eventual passing would have the most impact and that my loss would have the most impact. Then readers could move on to the latter third, which was all of the inspired things that happened for me, which I've told you about, so that you can see another way of moving forward. Then, after I published the book, the best insights of all came to me. And that's why I put them in 3 audio episodes. I now see the book and the audio episodes as a toolkit. I'll give you a hint as to what this insight was. I'll just come out and say it. It's explained much better in the audio episodes. It's a completely new way to see the concept of death. It occurred to me, being the logical person I am, because I was a mechanical engineer, if there's a loving God and a beautiful, beyond words, afterlife, and if God has a plan for each of us, then if you lose someone close to you, especially a spouse, then what's so tragic about that person going to this beautiful place ahead of you? And then you can go on to live a wonderful next chapter of life. And then when your time comes, you go and join your beloved spouse or loved one in the afterlife. The question is, what's so tragic about death and loss?
How long were you and Sam married?
We were married for almost 22 years at the point he passed. He passed at age 72. We got married kind of late in life. He was around 50 and I was, I think 42 when we got married.
You had 22 years. What was the diagnosis?
Actually, the way Sam's oncologist put it to us, well, let me tell you what the diagnosis was. It was liver cancer that had already spread to the pancreas at the time of diagnosis. And what's really sad about liver cancer and some other cancers are you feel perfectly fine. You have no idea you have cancer because there are no symptoms until it's very advanced. In fact, Sam never did have any symptoms. His liver numbers, I think, from a blood test went up and they said, we need to repeat this. And they did, and they were still high. They referred him for a CT scan where they saw all these tumors all over his liver, no symptoms. Really, in order to get something like this diagnosed early, you have to be lucky enough to have had a CT scan of that area of the body for some other medical reason. And then they see, wait a minute, there are tumors all over your liver. Then, or a tumor at that point, maybe it's early, and they see something on your liver, and then they can treat it beautifully. But it almost never gets diagnosed that early because of it being so asymptomatic. They told us about the diagnosis, and Sam's oncologist immediately told us, he said, you know how there are people you hear about with terminal diagnoses that they beat the odds and they survive it? We said, yeah. He said, that's not going to happen. There is zero chance, that Sam will survive this. And so we went down to the Mayo Clinic in the Phoenix area and also to Banner MD Anderson, also down in the Phoenix area for the second and third opinion. We were told the exact same thing by those 2 doctors as well. But even so, it's funny how the human mind is. Sam was so successful when he was treated in reducing the size of his tumors that we thought, well, maybe we'll get a miracle. You just go there. And we did. We both thought we'd get a miracle. But we didn't. He did live the maximum amount of time that the doctors said. They said he'll probably live a year, but he could live 2, and he had exactly 2.
What a story. When we think of early death, which, of course, he was 72, but still, that wasn't your plan. And we hear people that get in car accidents, they lose their spouse quickly, but you lost him slowly. What was that like to walk through that? I'm sure it's in the book.
It was an exercise in doing what needed to be done, but actually not till the end, because as I said, Sam was in such good shape for a year and a half. He didn't need any caregiving at that time, and you couldn't even tell he was being treated for cancer. So I guess during that time, actually, I remember exactly something that happened. After Sam had been under cancer treatment for a couple of months, and the tumors had started shrinking, and he wasn't even losing hair, much less losing muscle mass or weight. He was eating well. And I said, sweetie, it looks like you're going to do very well on this treatment. Maybe instead of thinking about what's going to eventually happen, according to the doctors, maybe we can just choose to be happy and kind of forget about what's going to happen in the end for as long as possible. And Sam was so optimistic, and he was a very funny man too. He said, hey, sweetie, sounds good to me. That's what we did. So we kind of forgot about it. I mean, he was on treatment, he couldn't forget that he was taking cancer medication every day, but we did succeed in just living our lives for a good year and a half. We traveled. We even went on cruises because that's what Sam loved. We just did whatever. And the doctors told us to do whatever. He said, don't worry about infections and things. Sam's going to die. Just have fun.
Oh, so none of this keep him secluded and away from anyone with a cold or any of that?
Nope. They just said, do what you want. So
wow.
we did.
And then how long after his passing did you write this book?
I guess it was about 2 years. I was looking back on all these things that had happened. I mean, my whole life was so positive and inspired, and all the opportunities that came my way that I embraced. Everything went my way, even auditions at the community playhouse. I'd never acted in anything. These other people were so much more experienced than I was. I wasn't going to get the part, and then I did. That describes my life for the 2 years after Sam passed, along with these other insights and the serendipitous events. It was just unbelievable. Now life is more kind of back to normal, but after 2 years of that, I thought I should write this in a book. There's nothing so special about me. If all of this was available to me, it's got to be available to others.
How do we access that? You're saying, hey, it happened for me, it can happen for others.
Tips for survivors, especially surviving spouses. Be open to guidance you may feel is coming your way. Trust it and let yourself be led. Be open to opportunities that come your way. You might think, oh, it's too soon. I couldn't possibly. People do a lot of things. They make a lot of decisions out of guilt. Something spared me from that. Oh, and the audio episodes address that much more fully. Embracing these possibilities turns out to be the starting point for that next chapter of life, for a whole new future, while you're waiting to join your loved one in the afterlife. But the best tip of all, I have not said anything about yet, and that was, I struck a balance between activity and alone time. People will tell you, keep yourself as busy as possible so you don't have time to think or feel. I instinctively knew that wasn't good advice. And even though it was well intended, I ignored it. What I did was I struck a balance between activity and alone time. So these new opportunities that were coming my way, I could have fun with them and start moving on into the next chapter of life, because I had no choice. There had to be a next chapter of life. Sam wasn't here on earth with me anymore. But the alone time you need, and you can interpret that any way you want, whether it's just sitting and thinking or taking a walk or a hike or reading a book, you have to process not so much the loss, because I would posit that loss isn't what we have been taught to think it is. We're not really losing anyone, but our life is undergoing a massive change. That needs to be addressed. It needs to be worked out and processed. So that's what the alone time is spent doing. Now, this actually was put to the test because just a few months after Sam passed in July of 2019, COVID came. And suddenly I was spending too much time alone, and that balance really was upset. I attribute that to the fact that I then had, over the next few months, those first few months of COVID, I had 3 depressions. Each one curiously lasted exactly 10 days. And I don't know whether it had more to do with the fact that Sam wasn't with me anymore on Earth. I think he's still with me, but he wasn't there on Earth with me anymore. Or all of the uncertainty and anxiety over COVID. It was probably a combination of the two. So it was put to the test. So strike a balance between activity and alone time.
Before we go, I have a couple specific questions. One is, how do we get your book and your audio?
Actually, I have a website, an author website called VickiParisGoodman.com, which is where I have some blog articles, but the audio episodes are at inspiredgrief.com. And all you have to do is put in your first name and your email address. Get the audio episodes. They are really packed with helpful information, concepts. They're really novel concepts. And so I want people to have the benefit. And even people who aren't faced with losing someone, someday they will. So do this now. The book is at inspiredgrief.com/book. That's the best pricing available on the book. I've discounted it there. So the book again is To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. The audio episodes in the book are a toolkit. The audio episodes will completely change the way you think of death and loss. The book is more of a roadmap to the next chapter of life. Together, they're very powerful.
Something that came up when I was looking at inspired grief, our family's going through several things right now that are pretty horrific. But in the midst of all of it, sometimes it feels like we should just be sad all the time, but we're finding these moments of joy, of clarity. We're celebrating the things in between. And can you talk about that? Because it sounds like you found those moments in between before you kind of got to this place where you felt like you were being guided.
I found a lot of joy. I think if people are creative, they can find ways to assuage the pain if they are feeling pain. You know, I felt a lot less pain than I expected to because of all of these things that happened. A lot of times in the evening, I'd be home alone and I'd get a little bit sad during the first few months after Sam passed. I thought, what can I do? You know, it almost seems like he was never here. And I thought, oh, I think I have this Valentine's Day card that he gave me just a few months before he passed, and I found it. And I read it every night for the first year after Sam passed. I kissed the card. In fact, I scanned it into the book, you know, so that people could see it. I read it every night for a full year. It was just a ritual I did, and it made me think of Sam, and it was, you know, it has his signature on it and the date, which was February of the year that he passed. It just reminded me, it was something tangible to make me think, yeah, Sam was my husband for all those years. I didn't imagine it. And it made me happy also. The most astounding thing that happened after Sam passed was that when I went to bed at night and turned out the lights, you know, I'd be relaxing for a few minutes and I'd get this smoky grayish white thing that kind of would float around and go in and out. And I thought, I'm just imagining it. I want so badly for there to be some manifestation of Sam's soul to be here with me that I'm imagining it. Probably my eyes getting accustomed to the dark. Sometimes it would be more vivid and I'd think, boy, that's hard to ignore. And then a few months later, it changed color. It became a neon yellow green, this like really limey, yellowy green, and really stunning, the color. And I thought, wow. But again, sometimes it was so subtle, I'd wonder if it was really there. So full year after Sam passed, I really grew tired of wondering whether this thing was a manifestation of Sam's soul. And I had begun to pray for the first time in my life after Sam passed. And I talked to God every night. I wasn't comfortable ever praying for anything for myself. So I'd pray for others. I'd pray for our country. I'd pray for whatever I could think of to pray for, but not myself. A year after Sam passed, I said to God early in the day, not at night when I usually prayed. I was just talking to God and I said, God, tonight I want you to do something for me. And I know I never ask for things for myself, but I'm making an exception today. I am really growing weary of wondering if the neon yellow green thing is Sam. So I have an idea. This is what you could do. I was telling God what to do. I said, if it is Sam, make the neon yellow green thing appear different than it ever has before, maybe more vivid or move differently. And if it's not Sam, give me just jet black to be the really decisive absence of the phenomenon. And then I'll know. And if it just appears the way it usually does, I'll know that God chose not to do as I'd asked and I'd be no worse off. So that night when it was time for bed, I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? What if I get jet black? Am I ready to find out this hasn't been Sam all this time? But I couldn't stay up forever. So I get into bed and I turn out the light. And instead of waiting the usual 3 to 5 minutes to appear, the neon yellow green thing was there immediately. That had never happened before. And it was vivid as I've ever seen it. And instead of floating around gently and kind of floating, going in and out for 30 seconds to a minute like it usually does before fading away gently, it flew across my view about 5 times in about 2 or 3 seconds and then off. So I burst into tears and thanked God and told him I'd never question the identity of the apparition again.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So the reason I told that story, Lori, is because people need to understand that these phenomena that occur in all different ways as symbols and words that come up or numbers, anything that's meaningful to you and your deceased loved one, it's not that uncommon to see these things, but you do have to be open and observant.
Well, Vicki, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for sharing us your journey. Before we go, what is it that you really want us to know?
Oh boy, I feel like I've said it all. If all of these things, positive, optimistic, inspired things can happen for me, it's got to be possible for it to happen to anyone. If you or someone you know is facing a loss or is stuck in grief, have them get my audio episodes. They're free. All you have to do is go to inspiredgrief.com. They're about 12 to 15 minutes each. Just listen to those, and maybe, just maybe, the alternative way that I propose of looking at death and loss can change everything for that person, for you.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
If you love this podcast, here's a big ask. Will you share with your friends and family, subscribe, give us a review, and a 5-star rating so that others looking to reinvent their lives will be able to get the help they're looking for? Thank you in advance.